that, we live in a time, this is unlike any other time I've ever experienced. We live in a time, this is the most helpless, hopeless time in society for so many people. And one of the things that I've noticed is that people are beginning to identify like who they are based on their ailments. Like I hear this phrase all the time, I have anxiety. I never heard that before. People are taking these, I have ADHD. Stop labeling yourself. But we want to put a label on our lives. I identify as a man of anxiety or a man of ADHD. We want to identify with our illness, or we want to identify with our sexual preference. Everybody wants to identify with their sexuality. And I say, well, hold on, that's not your identity. That's not who you are. Or we want to identify with our suffering. Oh, I was abused. Oh, I didn't feel safe. And we want to go back to our past. We want to lean on that and allow our past to determine our future. But Romans 8:28 tells us what? Well, I'm confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. Nope, that's the wrong verse. That's Philippians 1:6. How about this one? For God works all things out for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. There you go. I just nailed that one. And then in John 10:10a, Jesus said, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And what I realize is we live in a world where people have been robbed by the enemy. He's stolen their identity. They've been tethered to their past. They've been tethered to their sexuality. They've been tethered to the things they struggle with. And we all struggle. I'm not downplaying our struggle. But to be tethered to it and call your name by that thing and say, I have or I am, is not what God wants for us. So I'm heading to Africa with Daniel. I'm going to go shoot a couple animals, and he's going to video that, and we're going to make 20 podcasts for our book in the fall dialed in. But one of the things I'm excited about is I'm excited to see the women that are going, our wives are going, and they're like, we don't care about shooting. We just want to see giraffes and lions and elephants. So I did some research on the African elephant. Did you know the African elephant a bull elephant can weigh as much as 14,000 pounds? Now listen, I just got done reading Ernest Hemingway's The Green Fields of Africa. It's about his African safari. And in that book, he says, and I confirmed, a bull elephant has a diameter of their foot is 24 inches around. This is what it looks like. That big around. 24 inches in diameter. However, if you take that elephant as a baby and you want to train that elephant to be a circus elephant, all you have to do is take this spike. This is a tent spike from our church. Take this spike, drive it deep into the ground, tether that little baby elephant to it, and that baby elephant will fight real hard for probably a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. But at one point, that baby elephant will learn, no matter what I do, I have nothing that can help me, and I have no hope, and I'm going to be tethered to that 6-foot rope all my life. And so that little baby elephant, when it grows to be a 14,000-pound bull elk, can be tethered to a little stake in the ground and never move. Why? Because it has determined that no matter what it does, it is helpless and it is hopeless, and it will be tethered for the rest of its life. And it has no power to escape. And this is what I see with men today. Maybe I'm a pie-in-the-sky guy. Maybe I'm a dreamer. But God has made men for power. God has made you so that the world experiences the full weight of who you are, and then let them deal with that stuff. That's not your problem. Your problem is to let the world handle and experience the full masculine weight that you bring to change and make this a better world. But what I've seen in so many guys, and here tonight even, we come to the room tethered. Like we walk into a room and it's almost like we're dragging a stake with us. Like we bring this baggage, we bring this history, and we say, hold on, I can't. Yeah, I mean, Jim, that's for you. That's not for me. I'm locked into this. I'm too old now, or I'm not smart enough, or I've got too much baggage, or I'm addicted to this or that. And so we bring this in and we let it identify us. And tonight, I want to talk to you about that, because when we study Job and we study this concept that we're calling the patience of Job, remember, we're talking about the weaknesses and the struggles that Bible heroes had. We talked about actually Ian did a great job of talking about the valor of Gideon, going from a wimp to a warrior. And then last week we talked to you guys about the defiance of Job. Remember that? He says, God tells Job, I want you to go 5,000, Jonah. Tells Jonah, I get these J-O's confused. tells Jonah, I want you to go 550 miles north to Nineveh and tell them to repent. And instead, Jonah gets on a ship and heads 25 miles out past the Mediterranean Sea, out to Tarshish, which in the Atlantic Ocean, past the Straits of Gibraltar, trying to get away from God, and a giant shark swallows him, right? Tonight we're talking about the patience of Job. When I started looking at this, I thought, where in Job is this? Where in Job is this? And the patience of Job is not talked about in the book of Job. It's actually in the book of James. And so we're going to talk about James chapter 5, verses 7 to 11. But I got to tell you, and I had an experience yesterday when I was putting this together. I realized that as I dove into what these words meant that we're studying tonight, that this is actually, I'm kind of excited. This is my superpower. Like, I don't know, we all have superpowers, right? Tonight, this is my superpower. This word is my superpower. I have a life motto, and I've always had this motto, and it says this: you don't have to be the best, you simply have to outlast the rest. Because in my life, I realized it's not the best guy who wins. It's not the smartest guy who excels. You don't have to be the best to be the best. You just have to hang in there and outlast the quitters. So we're going to pray, and we're going to go take a deep dive into James chapter 5. So in James chapter 5, I'm going to read this 3 times, and each time I'm going to place it with a word, okay? So I want you just to hang on here with me. So James chapter 5, verse 7. I'm going to read the verse as it appears in the New American Standard, and I'm going to replace one of the words with the Greek words, and then I'm going to read it the way that it could have been read with another translation. So here we go. Therefore, be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for precious produce in the soil, being patient about it until he gets the early and late rains. You too be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Do not complain, brothers, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. As an example, brethren, of suffering and patience, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. And he continues from there. Now, another way you could say this is this way. I'm going to put the word wait in there. Therefore, wait, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce in the soil, waiting for it, and he goes in early until it gets to the early and late rains. You too, wait, strengthening your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Now here's what I want to share with you before I go into this whole thing. There are 2 Greek words here that are used. Both are translated patient, and depending on your Bible. And when you read this, you're going to be blown away with what happens here. So, if I were to read this and then replace the Greek words, here's how it would read. Therefore, makrothymia, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, makrothymia about it, until it gets the early and late rains. You too be macrothymia, strengthening your hearts. I'm struggling. For the coming of the Lord is near. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is coming and standing right at the door. As an example, brethren, of suffering and macrothymia, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. So we see 4 times there this Greek word macrothymia for patience. Okay, we're going to get to verse 11 in a second. But right now, I just want you to understand this word literally means, macrothymia, literally means to bear up under suffering. So it's the elephant with a stake tethered to it, saying there's nothing I can do. I'm just going to be a patient. A farmer is waiting and waiting and waiting. A fisherman has his line in the water. He's waiting and waiting and waiting. He's patient. He's waiting for something to happen. This is how we would most of us would define patience, right? It's waiting for something to happen. Okay. So we see, this is what really happens here that's really interesting, is what from verse 10 to verse 11, we see a transition in thought. We see, I would say, a contextual shift. So we go from this waiting, this patience, this macrothymia. All of a sudden, Paul puts another word in here, or James puts another word in here, and at first it threw me off. So, I'm going to read this to you in the King James Version so you get context for our topic tonight. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job. So the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord. Now, the word patience is the Greek word hupomene. Hupomene. Sounds like an Indian word or something, right? Hupomene. So the word patience here is different than the word above, macrothymia, right? We have two different words. So there's a shift in thinking from waiting for something to happen to all of a sudden this word hupotomy. Okay, hupomene. In a New Living Translation, we read this. We give great honor to those who endure under suffering. For instance, you know about Job, a man of great endurance. So we have a hint now. Hupomene not only can mean patience, but somehow it talks about endurance. Okay, New American Standard, which is the Bible I teach out of, it says this: we count those blessed who endured. You have heard of the endurance of Job, and have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealings, that the Lord is full of compassion and merciful. So, what you've seen here then, 4 times we see the word macrothymia mentioned to replace the word patience, and 1 time we saw patience in the King James Version, that we saw this word hupomene, okay? All right, so what happens here is this. Job's patience, in air quotes, Job's patience teaches us that there is a vast difference, and here's where my superpower comes in, between simply waiting for things to pass in verses 7 through 10 and actively asserting ourselves and building grit into our lives that is described in verse 11. So that Greek word hupotene is a massive word for tonight's teaching. So listen to this. This word describes the person who hupomene describes the person. How many times have I said this wrong by the time the sermon's over? Right? Hupomene. Okay. Hupomene describes the person who plays the movie of their life while grinding it out in the troubles and sufferings of life. They are motivated to press on during dark times because this is the key. They see the light at the end of the tunnel, which produces this character trait of grit. So the difference between this animal sitting here on a stake living his life here, and the difference between a man who's just suffering through life, tethered to their sufferings, tethered to their history, tethered to their mistakes, that person feels like there's no way out. But the person with grit, the person who has endurance like Job, even in the midst of their failures and sufferings and trials, they see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And that light of the tunnel gives them hope, and that light of the tunnel helps them to live a life of grit, which I define as the stubborn refusal to quit. Here's what Douglas Moose says about hupomene. This is a strong, active, and challenging response to life struggles. Here's an example. In 2021, I shot the biggest buck of my life, old broken top. Remember the story? I shot him in the eyeball, blew out his horns. I was alone. It was 100 degrees. I had to pack him out. I finally got him put under a tree. And when I was getting down to my buddy who picked me up at the bottom of the mountain in the quad after about 5-6 miles of hiking, we drove his side-by-side, which was brand new, by the way, all the way up to the top. The side-by-side broke down. And the only way to get back to camp is to walk about another 8 miles at this point to camp in 90 to 100 degree weather, okay? At one point, the treads of my shoes literally peeled off, and the company replaced my boots. At one point, I almost fell on my face. I had blood all over me. It was hot, sweaty. At one point, my buddy asked if he could carry my gun. That's like peeing in the urinal next to me when there's a wide open group of urinals. Don't you ever say that. So I ended up, but I remember at one point I was probably about 12 miles into this day walking, and he was like, "We're out of water. I mean, we're hurting." And he said, and I had just almost fallen over the tread on my boot, and I remember I looked at him and I laughed, and he goes, "Why are you laughing?" I go, "Man, this is going to be an epic story." I just knew we were in the middle of an epic story, right? And that knowing that in the suffering, I was living this narrative that was going to be repeated through years of my life and story. Every time I look at old Broken Top, I thought it invigorated me, right? Have you ever been in one of those situations where it hurts so bad, you're laughing, you're like, this sucks so bad. Man, this is a great story. And that's hupomone. Hupomone says that. Hupomone says, hey, I'm going to not only endure this suffering, but I'm going to grind it out. I'm going to push through. I'm going to get it done because it teaches us that we don't have to simply suck it up and be a victim in life. No matter how hard life gets, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's a teachable moment ahead. There's an opportunity for you to grow, and maybe a pair for some of you. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to grow a pair. That wasn't in my notes. That just happened right there. I thought that was really good. So the question is, what are you tethered to? What are you tethered to that is hindering you from being your best version of Christ? What cop-out? What excuse are you making? Oh, I'm too old, or I'm too slow, or I'm not smart, or I'm not good looking. I'm none of those things. Just do it anyway, right? Okay. Verse 11, though, gives us verse 11, as we jump into verse 11, we look at this, it gives us a kind of a new paradigm and a new outlook on how to view things. Look at this. And this goes back to this Greek word hupomone, right? Okay, watch this. Verse 11 seems so random. Do you see this? Who we count those blessed who endured. Now realize that the people he's talking about here are people who suffered. We count those people blessed who endured. So Job's, and what this is talking about here, when we talk about Job's life, which you're going to study in detail when I'm done with my little message here, Job's ability to face the storms with tenacity and force is a long-term blessing that so often appears as a short-term curse. So a lot of the things that we deal with in life that are short-term, they appear to be a curse in our lives, those are blessings in disguise. Those are opportunities for us to build the character trait of grit, for us to grow in love, for us to grow in integrity, for us to grow. So listen, here's the deal. Storms build strength. Storms build strength. You want to be strong? Go lift something heavy. Go deal with something hard. Storms build strength. Look at James chapter 5, verse 11. In the New Living Translation says this, we give great honor to those who endure under suffering. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? Think about that for a second. I'm so sick and tired of hearing Navy SEALs brag about how hard SEAL training was. Is that all you got, bro? I mean, you divorced at a rate of 95%. You get divorced. Oh, but SEAL training was hard. But there's a bond that happens there because it was so hard and they suffered, right? Don't ring the bell. And that's what we're talking about. Suffering together, building grit. In James chapter 1, verse 2. So in the first part of James, there's a verse that if you've been in the church at any amount of time, you know this verse by heart. It says this, consider it joy, my brothers, whenever you encounter trials of many kinds, knowing that listen to this, knowing that the testing of your faith produces, hupomone. Hupomone. It produces patience, or it produces endurance. It produces hupomone. That's the word. It's saying, hey, when you're going through trials, guys, this is a good thing to suffer. It's a good thing to be tested. It's a good thing to put your mettle to the test, okay? Because it produces endurance. And then verse 4 continues in James 1. And let endurance, guess what word that is? Hupomone. And let hupomone have its perfect results, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Do we live in a society where males lack? Yes, because we refuse to suffer. Hupomone, according to Expositor's Bible commentary, says this, is more than one's ability to bear hard things. Listen to this. I love this definition. It is a forceful and active word that speaks of tenacity and stick-to-itiveness. I did not make that up. I read that right out of a book. William Barclay says this. Listen to this. It is not the patience that passively endures, which is macrothymia. Instead, it is the quality that enables a man to stand on his feet facing the storm. Hupomone is the quality that makes people not simply suffer things, but to overcome them. The effect of testing born in the right way is strength to bear still more and to conquer still harder battles. Isn't that awesome? So God puts us in over the head. He puts us in over our head and says, sink or swim. And we always can swim. Hebrews 12:1 is one of my favorite passages of the Bible, talking about Jesus. Listen to this. You guys know this verse. Therefore, since we have surrounded us, I got to be careful here because I have this memorized in NIV, but I have it written in New American Standard. So I get screwed up because I think one way and memorize another way. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with it, hupomene, the race marked out for us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him, hupomene, the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. For consider him who has hupomene, such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. If you want to be like Jesus, we have to endure like Jesus. We have to see the end at the beginning like Jesus. We have to play the movie in the midst of our pain like Jesus. He thought about humanity. He thought about the big picture. And that's what hupomene does. We get caught up in this Jesus loves me. He only thinks about me. Gosh, you guys, he's got bigger fish to fry. He loves us, but we got to be careful about personalizing our faith to the point we rot it on the gospel. So I grew up in California. It is a good place to be from. God bless you when you move back. But whenever you watch the news and you watch these hurricanes, I always see the same thing on every hurricane newsreel. Do you know what it is? I always see the same thing. I see a lot of palm trees. That's the one thing I really miss about California is I love the palm trees. We had a palm tree in my backyard. It's really interesting with a palm tree. Palm trees are the one tree that can withstand a hurricane because palm trees have three things that a Douglas fir doesn't have. The first thing a palm tree has is it only has leaves at the very top, and it's very limited in its leaves. So when the force of the wind comes, it's only hitting the top portion of the palm tree. Another thing a palm tree has, if you look at the root ball of a palm tree, it's the craziest looking thing. It's got these little tubular things, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and they just spread out to where they can actually latch onto the sand and be grounded in the sand when a hurricane hits. And if by chance the hurricane blows over the palm tree in the sand, you just flip it back over and dig a hole. It's good to go, baby. Another thing about palm trees that's pretty cool is this. You know how when you open up a Doug fir, it has rings that grow from the inside out, right? Not so with palm trees. When you cut open a palm tree, you see little brown dots. And those little brown dots are like steel cables that go from the root ball all the way to the top. And they give it its strength vertically. So when the storm hits and it blows that palm tree, it actually makes the palm tree stronger. The palm tree actually gets stronger in the storm. When we look at this Greek word hupomene, it's saying, hey, when the storms of life come, when the tensions of life come, when bad things happen, when your health is failing, man, guys, look to the end. Okay, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to die. And you're going to get a new body and a new brain, and you're going to get everything new, and you're going to be with Jesus forever, running around earth that's been renewed and rebuilt, and you don't have to worry about what clothes you're going to wear. You're like a 5-year-old brain with a 20-year-old body, full head of hair, rocking my 80s mustache. It's going to be awesome. But we're so afraid of that. That's the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to die. And that's the greatest thing that could ever happen to you is you dying and being with Jesus. We're all screwed up, you guys. We're soft. We need to see the outcome. So let's look at verse 11 again. It says this about hupomene. It says, the outcome of the Lord's dealings, that the Lord is full of compassion and merciful. So here's what I want to share with you, and I prayed this a little bit earlier, and it probably made some of you uncomfortable. Job's patience reminds us that God cannot and will not go against his character or nature, which is love, goodness, compassion, mercy, and the list goes on. Now I'm going to say something that's going to get you theologically tweaked. God is limited. You know, we often forget, guys, that God has called us to steward the bodies he gave us so that we'll be ready, healthy, and spiritually dangerous to fight the good fight. That's why we're so excited to partner with Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Join me on my journey by going to mountaintough.com and getting your free 6-week trial when you type in the code ARENA30. You won't be disappointed. Stay dangerous. Now I'm going to say something that's going to get you theologically tweaked. God is limited to his nature. Now I know we think that God is not limited at all, But God cannot sin because his nature prohibits it. He is a holy God. So God is limitless, but he was limited to his nature. Okay, let me give you an example. I'm not as smart as some of these disciples and apostles. James chapter 1, verse 12. We're in the book of James still. James said, "Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive a crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he was tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil." Can't do it. Because why? His nature is good and holy. Oh, come on, Jim, that's James. James is controversial. Martin Luther hated James. Martin Luther wanted to not even put him in the Bible, so Martin Luther's translation, he put the book of James after Revelation so nobody would see it. Come on, this is James we're talking about. This guy's legalistic. He's too black and white. All right, let's talk about Titus. Titus. Paul's letter to Titus. Titus 1:1. Paul, a bondservant of God and the apostle of Jesus Christ, for the faith of those chosen of God and of the knowledge of the truth which is according to godliness, in the hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised long ago. Hold on, he can't lie? No, he's limited to his nature. So what we do here, when we figure this out, we can trust. Here's what I'm saying, you guys. We can trust in the midst of the storms of life. We can trust in the God who is the God of love. He is the God of goodness. He is the God of compassion. He is the God of mercy. And I've shared this with you before. When we launched Men in the Arena in 2012, our house within 3 months was in foreclosure. We couldn't pay our bills. I needed to raise $60,000 a year for the organization just to survive. And it was basically my paycheck. That's a lot of money, $60,000. Couldn't raise it. Wasn't coming in. House in foreclosure. Getting the white letters, then the yellow letters, then the pink letters. And then you get the guy from India calling you. Then you get the lady from Compton calling you. Then you get the guy from Alabama calling you. Then you get the person from Mexico calling you. And they're all asking for the same thing, money now. And it was a real dark time in my life. And it was a real storm I was going through. And somebody said this to me. You know what you should do, Jim? You should just pray the character and nature of God. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, just call the qualities out in God that express his nature and character. So I did. I started saying, God, you are good. God, you are God of love. God, you are God of provision. God, you own the cattle on 1,000 hills. God, you own the earth and everything in it. God, you hang the stars and call them benign. And then I would say this, and if you really are that God, like if you are the God that I'm believing in, then you need to pull this off because you called me this mess. You need to deal with this for me. And he did. And so that's why when I hear guys wrestling over stuff that I think is not insurmountable, I'm just like, just trust God. I might lose my house. So what? It might hurt. So what? The only way you're going to build strength into your character is to suffer and to deal with resistance and to build this character trait of hupomone, which apparently is my superpower. Because I just will not, I have another motto in my life, and the motto is beat the dead horse. You know how they say stop beating the dead horse? Bunch of atheists. I say beat the dead horse until Jesus resurrects it. I love what Dutch Meyer said at TCU in the 1950s, head football coach at TCU. It's in their locker room today, TCU's locker room. They should have had it against Georgia 2 years ago. But it said, we will fight them till hell freezes over. Then we'll fight them on ice. Bring the snowstorm, baby, because TCU horn dogs are coming. Okay. So the question tonight is this. Where have you limited God? And where have you allowed your life to be tethered? God has made you a man of power and strength and authority, and he's made you to be in the game and in the arena, not the anonymous bleachers wearing a counterfeit uniform. He's called you to be the real deal. So tonight we have to ask ourselves, is God, guys, listen, is God really who he says he is? Because if he really is who he says he is, and if he really is good, and if he really does love you, and if he really did create you, then we've got to trust in that, right? Job, the thing you're going to learn about Job is Job refused. There's so many funny things about Job. There are so many funny things about Job. But Job refused to give in. He refused to stop fighting. He argued with his buddies all the way to the end, and then he argued with God. He just refused to give in. He fought the whole way. He didn't sit back and take it. Suck it up. Take it like a man. A man doesn't take it like that. A man moves forward. And God finally, here's a wonderful thing about God. I feel like God did an injustice here with Job. He kind of got, but when you look at Job and you go back to Job chapter 42, verse 10, it says this: the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he prayed for his friends, and the Lord increased all that Job had twofold. He doubled everything he had taken away. And I thought, man, isn't that God? Isn't that what he does for us? He says, hey, I'm going to put you in over your head, and then I'm going to, right when you think you're sinking, right when you think that you're driving the stake in the ground, you're going to tether your leg to it and just hang out there for the rest of your life and be pathetic. God says, listen, I want to come in and give you a double portion, but you got to suffer through it first. You got to let the storm build strength. You got to let the storm draw your roots deep. You got to let the storm strengthen your trunk. And I say this all the time, but he specializes in turning your tragedy into his trophy, your betrayals into his blessing, your pain into his power, your violations into his victory, your mess into his message. He loves doing that. That's what he does. And so there's more than the mess. There is a message, but you got to give your life to Jesus first, because it's only by radically giving your life to Jesus can he take your mess and turn it into his message. When you say, I am not going to let life tether me to be less than the man God has called me to be. I'm going to step in to my best version because of Jesus. I'm going to be a man of hupomony. I'm going to be a man who inflicts my force and my assertiveness. And I'm going to be a man who, when the storms of life come, I'm not going to let them blow me back into the 90s. I'm going to stand firm, and I'm going to fight, because I know there's something on the other side for me. And there's something on the other side for you.